Day morning with some clear spells, and where we've got some shelter from the wind, there'll be a patchy frost to wake up to across central and eastern parts of the UK. A bright start though for many. However, the southwest, South Wales, parts of Northern Ireland will see a milder start to the day. Certainly for Cornwall it's very mild to begin things, but it's also wet as a band of heavy rain moves through. That's pushing into Devon, Somerset, Dorset by 7 a.m, into Wales at this stage as well as Northern Ireland. It's accompanied by a strengthening wind, and that wind will affect much of the UK. It will also tend to thicken up the cloud through Scotland with a few spots of light rain around first thing Wednesday. But the brightest skies will be through the Midlands, the east and southeast of England, where there will be some glimmers of sunlight through the morning and early afternoon before this system moves eastwards. That's going to bring thicker cloud and some light rain and drizzle, but it tends to peter out by the afternoon. Brighter skies for a time towards the southwest, and it's in the southwest where we're going to see that mild air make inroads. 13 Celsius, for example, in Exeter, whilst it stays just 5 or 6 across eastern parts of the country. But by Thursday, we're all in the mild air, and that means a frost-free start to the day, but it's also going to be a very lively start with strong winds and heavy rain, even some thunderstorms around. The wettest weather first thing in the north and west, that clears east. Some brighter skies follow, but the weather's going to be very unsettled, very changeable through Friday and the weekend. Further rain and strong winds at times, but mild with it as well.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems in South Lanarkshire on the M74. The southbound exit is partly blocked to junction 5 at the Bellshill bypass of the Rafe interchange, where a lorry's broken down. On the M62 in Cheshire, one lane's closed eastbound from junction 11 to 12 towards the M60 towards the Eccles interchange. A car has broken down, and there are still long queues on the Surrey stretch of the M25 anti-clockwise. Only the inside lane is open from junction 10 to 9 from the A3 and Leatherhead. Trailer overturned and recovery work continues, and on the M27 in Hampshire, one lane stays closed westbound from junction 7 to 5 towards Southampton following an accident not being helped by the roadworks on that stretch. And ferries are suspended on the Orkney Islands because of the bad weather affecting services to and from Stronsay. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
We're giving you not one, but 2 chances to win this month, with 2 prize bundles that include an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash. But that's not all. You'll also get a brand new iPhone 16 and a £500 shopping voucher to spend at your favourite store. So why not be extra lucky this month? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Very, very good evening to you. It's Wednesday, the 19th of February. I'm Martin Daubney, filling in for the big man, Nigel Farage, on Farage tonight. In a dramatic turn of events, President Trump has branded UK's President Zelensky a dictator. Are we witnessing the end of the 80-year-old transatlantic alliance? And a sleepy village in Essex, population 700, has the dubious honour of being Britain's first place where there are more asylum seekers than local residents. I'll be speaking to a councillor on his fears for resident safety and plummeting property prices. And pro-Corbyn Independent MP Zara Sultana has outraged Reform voters today by comparing the party to the National Front and the BNP. And this comes as the party heads to Birmingham for its national rally on the 28th of March. We've got a spicy show ahead, all of that to come. But first, here's your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you from the newsroom just after 7 o'clock. And the top story tonight, Donald Trump has launched a scathing attack on Volodymyr Zelensky, calling him a dictator who has done a terrible job and shattered his country. In a post on Truth Social, the United States president suggested Zelensky was prolonging the war to keep what he described as the gravy train of support flowing. Trump also claimed he alone could negotiate an end to the war, saying Joe Biden never tried and Europe has failed to bring peace. Well, meanwhile, here in the UK, opposition figures have criticised Donald Trump after he called Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator, as I just mentioned moments ago. Kemi Badenoch has rejected the claim, saying Zelensky is Ukraine's democratically elected leader, while urging Sir Keir Starmer to increase defence spending. Meanwhile, leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey, has condemned comments from Trump, calling for others to also reject the claims. Downing Street, though, hasn't commented so far as Sir Keir Starmer prepares to meet Trump in Washington next week. In other news, UK inflation has jumped to 3%, the fastest rise in 10 months, driven by soaring food prices, airfares and private school fees. The energy, water and council tax bills are also set to rise in April, meaning households are bracing for yet more pressure on budgets. Meanwhile, businesses say higher wages and national insurance hikes could also push prices up even further. The government, though, is warning the road to low inflation will be bumpy, and political parties are trading blame over tax and spending policies. Retailers selling knives online will face stricter laws as a review has found it's easier for children to buy blades than paracetamol. New rules mean tougher prison sentences for selling knives to under 18s and a legal duty for retailers to report bulk or suspicious purchases. The crackdown follows tragedies linked to the unlicensed sale of knives, as the government is vowing to protect young people from knife crime. A builder who murdered his wife and stepson after refusing to accept their divorce has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 34 years. Calogero Ricotta stabbed his wife to death at their home in Essex before killing her son as he tried to protect her. A judge called Ricotta controlling and coercive and said his vanity, his pride and ego led to those murders. Well, officers were at the scene within just minutes, where he was quickly arrested.
Put your hands in the air now. Put your hands in the air. Show me your hands. Get on your knees. Get on your knees. On your knees. Put your hands behind your head. Hands behind your head. Don't move. Don't move. You're under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder. You don't have to say it.
And weather news for you. The UK's cold and grey spell is finally coming to an end, with much milder weather on the way. By the end of this week, temperatures will be above average across the whole country, warmer than Greece, in fact, which is in the grip of an unusual cold snap. Some eastern areas of the country could see highs of 16 degrees on Friday, a big jump from the usual 9 degrees for mid-February. But with low pressure taking over soon, unsettled conditions will follow, bringing wind and rain. That's the news on GB News, a full roundup at the top of the hour. Now, though, it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to Farage now. Today, Donald Trump has launched an astonishing, eviscerating attack on the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, claiming he needs to move fast or risk losing Ukraine altogether. The US President has accused Zelensky of being a dictator without elections. He said he has done a terrible job and even suggested he was prolonging the war to keep the gravy train of support flowing. While writing on Truth Social, the President said this: "A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. In the meantime, we are successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something all admit, but only Trump and the Trump administration can do. I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered and millions have unnecessarily died." Well, he also added on Truth Social that he is a dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or have no country left, as we just said. Now, let's get to the studio to discuss this with the former Lord Chancellor and the Conservative MP, Sir Robert Buckland, as well as my wonderful panel, the former Labour MP, Lloyd Russell-Moyle, and the former Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng. Gentlemen, hello. Welcome to the studio. Let's start with you, Sir Robert. An eviscerating attack, nothing was left untouched. She started by calling him a modestly successful comedian. It got worse from there, calling him a dictator that wouldn't allow elections. And then a key point, saying half of the money we sent to him is missing. An astonishing evisceration. What's your take on it?
Well, it's an appalling stab in the back by somebody who's supposed to be the leader of the free world. It's demeaning to the office of president. It demonstrates once again that Donald Trump is not fit to be the president of the United States. And these remarks are nothing short of disgraceful. They undermine the solidarity that all of us in the West have shown with a country, a sovereign country that was attacked in an unprovoked way by a dictator. Vladimir Putin, a corrupt dictator. Is Donald Trump really saying that he's on the side of Vladimir Putin? If so, God help the world.
He's probably saying he's on the side of getting this war over. It's all fair and well to have a pop at Donald Trump, but this war's been raging for 3 years. The third anniversary is on Monday. There's no end in sight. Like it or not, some kind of end game appears to be in sight.
So you do a deal over the heads of the people who actually are affected by this. You don't involve Ukraine. You try and do some. You treat politics like some sort of business deal, and you abandon millions of people to a fate that they do not deserve or want. That's not leadership. That's not the politics of freedom. It's an appalling way to conduct oneself. He needs to get real very quickly and understand that decisions about Ukraine cannot be made without the Ukrainian people's involvement. What if it was Britain? What if we were invaded? Would we give up Kent and the home counties and have a deal done over our heads? It is outrageous, Martin, and it is a disgrace.
So, Robert, you can say that all you like. You can protest all you like. The European Union leaders can protest all they like. So Keir Starmer can protest all they like. Doesn't matter. Won't change a thing. Donald Trump has come in and said this is the way this will end, and that's what's going to happen.
Well, it's an extraordinary way to go about doing a deal because he's revealed his entire hand of cards before the negotiation even began. The concessions that he made about NATO membership, land and territory are entirely the wrong way to conduct politics and diplomacy. I mean, it would be laughable if it wasn't so serious. We're talking about the lives of millions of people here and the freedom of the West.
But if this was so easy, if the diplomatic route that you're suggesting involved Zelensky was so easy, why hasn't it happened in 3 years?
Because you're dealing with a dictator. You're dealing with a man who is an unreasonable, irrational actor. That's Putin I'm talking about, not Trump. That's another question. But with such an adversary in the Kremlin, are you really telling me that we can, as we did 70, 80, 90 years ago, assume that we are dealing with a reasonable person? Look at what's happened as a result of Putin's actions. And this is insinuating an insidious approach being taken by some politicians, both in America and here, that somehow Ukraine was to blame for this war, is something that we've got to utterly reject. That is not true. Nothing in these tweets or posts is based in fact. He's made assertions that are all factually wrong, but that's typical of this man. He's a stranger to the truth, and once again he's demonstrating that in spades.
What about the assertion that a lot of money has gone missing before the war? Transparency International told us Ukraine is one of the world's most corrupt nations. Why would that change during a war? There's reason to believe it may have got worse. He has every right to say, where's our money gone?
Yeah, well, I think that questions about Ukrainian governance are perfectly legitimate.
Which has been riddled with corruption for decades.
Yeah, but we're in the mid. He's not just some commentator. He's the president of the United States. He's supposed to be the leader of the free world, and he's supposed to show responsibility. When you've got great power, Martin, it comes with great responsibility, and responsibility to exercise language that is restrained, that shows leadership, that is balanced, is incumbent upon the holder of that high office. Donald Trump is disregarding all those norms, and they're not just conventions, they're important principles that guarantee stable and clear leadership and the unity of the West that is so important if we're going to fight back against not just Russia but other state actors who challenge freedom and do not believe in the democratic values that we hold dear.
But Plan A, the plan we already had, visibly and provably wasn't working. Millions dead, a country wiped out. You know, billions of dollars have gone in, no real tangible throughput. We're at still loggerheads, nothing is changing. What do you suggest? We just carry on with the same, send endless billions to Ukraine and never see an end to this?
Well, when you have an invasion of one sovereign country by another with no justification, you've got to stand up for those values. You don't just meekly say, you know, this has become too difficult, we have to surrender. If there is to be an agreement, it can't be some patched-up armistice that doesn't solve the problem, and it certainly shouldn't involve the whole-scale transfer of territory that will just serve Putin's objectives.
But even Zelensky and a great deal of the Ukrainian public now perhaps admit they don't want to give away territory, but they may have to get this over. Are you saying, as an outsider, that Ukraine shouldn't be allowed to do that to reach peace?
Get them on the table. They're the ones who should be helping to determine this peace. You can't do it over their heads. And this is why the meetings in Saudi Arabia, the bilateralism,
but nothing's changing.
The shooting
nothing's
from the
changed
hip
for 3
diplomacy
years.
is not the way to deal with this situation. Well, would we have said that in the middle of the last war? Would we have said, look, we're sacrificing a lot in blood and treasure here, but you know what? Let's do a deal with dictators. Let's compromise. Let's give them what they want. Of course we wouldn't. Of course we wouldn't. And the principles are as true now as they were then. You think of previous holders of the office like Roosevelt, like Eisenhower, like Ronald Reagan. Would they have behaved like this? Not on your life.
OK, so Robert, thank you very much. Let's bring in my panel now. I'm going to come to you first, Lloyd Russell Moore. What's your take on an extraordinary day in global politics?
Look, I think that Trump has gone on some crazed Twitter escapade or whatever the social media platform he's using this time round. And he's clearly been on the special sauce or something.
Well, he doesn't drink, so...
Yes, well, maybe it's something else that he's been on, but there's something gone terribly wrong with him on this. Now, I actually don't disagree that we need a robust negotiation. I don't disagree that territory transfer will be on the table. But what you can't do is give up all the other aspects of that on the table. You have to keep on the table that Ukraine will become part of NATO. Otherwise, you're just giving territory up for nothing. You know, you can't take off the table that we won't put more money in. Because otherwise, Russia will just say, OK, that's fine. We'll make this deal. You'll deprive Ukraine of any military and we'll just come back in a few years' time. So, of course, a deal should be struck. A deal should have been struck a year and a half ago because the lines have not basically changed in a year and a half. But the deal has to be done on an equitable basis with the Ukrainians around the table, not with some despots meeting in another despot in Saudi Arabia. You know, kind of it's all the awful places of the world. And Donald Trump seems to have kind of dancing their tune. That's not how you negotiate. You don't agree with the other side on every point.
It is how this negotiation is happening. You can say
that's capitulation.
You can say you want everyone sat around the table and being tickety-boo. That isn't happening. It hasn't happened for 3 years. Why should it happen now? Donald Trump is saying he wants to end this, he wants to end it soon, and we don't know the details yet. Is it worth a try?
Donald Trump says muscularly, I'm going to plough money into this, I'm going to make sure that it is a peace that is confirmed. But I am going to negotiate with Trump. A new president can reset that arrangement. Resetting up our embassies, I've got no problem with that part of it. The problem that I've got a part with is negotiation means that you get the other side to move at least an inch your way. And what seems to be happening now is he's giving everything that they're asking for and nothing that Ukraine is asking for.
So look,
I don't know the details yet.
That's what I was going to say, what Martin said. We don't actually know what the details are. I agree that all the mood music from Trump suggests or would, suppose that he's fully behind Putin, but we don't actually know the details of the deal. I think a lot of what Robert said about, no other president would behave like this, I think Donald Trump would agree with that. The whole point about him is that he's different from all those presidents and all the world that we grew up in. And what he's saying is, the last 70, 80 years where essentially we were living on the bounty of the United States, on their goodwill, we weren't, not us particularly, but a lot of NATO countries weren't spending enough on their defence. He's saying to NATO, enough. You've got to look after your own continent. You've got to pay for the security of your continent, and you can't live off our handouts, essentially. And that, I think, for a president of the United States is a legitimate thing to do. Yeah. Now, where I disagree with him is the manner in which he's done the negotiations. He's cut out the Ukrainians, and Robert very eloquently said they're the ones who are at the front line and are being suffering. And that's why people compared it to Munich in 1938, because the Czechs weren't there. And that was a scandal even at the time. And the other thing that I totally disagree with him on is I can't think of any president since the war that has just cut out the Allies. That phrase, the Allies, that goes back to the First World War. And we've always had this understanding that, yes, the United States provided leadership, but there was an alliance. There were colleagues, there were people that you had to bring on side. Now, what he's done, and I was, open-mouthed at this, is shut all of that down. He's completely cut out the EU, he's cut out the UK, he's cut out Ukraine, and is now dealing what he sees, strongman to strongman with Vladimir Putin. We just have to wait and see what the details are. So, as usual with Trump, I think a lot of what he says is right and has got good instincts. But the manner in which he's doing this and the offence he's causing is to me, very counterproductive.
But if you're a Ukrainian and a deal is made that territory is given without any security concerns, that doesn't stop the fighting, because you will have then insurgents continuing to want the fighting on the ground.
That's right.
So it might make the deal work for a global level, but it doesn't at the local level. And the other problem is that, if you remember, when Ukraine became independent, they had nuclear weapons.
That's right.
And there was an international agreement of which we are signatories, the Americans are signatories, the Russians are signatories, and the French are signatories, I believe. I'm not sure about the French, and the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians said, we will give up nuclear weapons if you agree to preserve our territorial integrity. Now, the problem with if we do not allow that to happen, if we do not fulfil our commitment that we signed in international law at that moment, is that every other country in the world that is on the edge of getting nuclear weapons
they'll be incentivised to get them.
Okay, well, I'm going to get them.
Gentlemen, we have to leave it there. We seem to run out of time. So, Robert Buckland, thank you very much. Of course, Kwasi and Lloyd, thank you very much for joining us. An excellent start to the show. Thank you very, very much. Thanks to my panel. Now, coming up, the arch-Corbynista MP, Zara Sultana, has launched an astonishing attack on Nigel Farage and the Reform Party. She's compared them to the BNP and the National Front. Now, is this freedom of speech, or is it an incitement to violence? That's next.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we're going to introduce you to Liam Wildish. Liam, well, I'd like to think he's a friend of mine because I follow him on Instagram, on TikTok there as well.
You're a big fan, aren't you?
Big fan, because there's what he does. He's a cleaner. He cleans signs. But the thing is, he's not employed by councils or whatever. He does this voluntarily. And you sort of think to yourself,
Well, who cleans these signs? Why have these signs been allowed to get into this terrible state of disrepair and filthiness?
So basically, long story short, about 6 years ago, I used to be a window cleaner. In the community where I lived, I noticed all of the road signs were filthy, and I was perfectly equipped to clean them. So basically, I cleaned the road signs as a bit of a thank you to the community and sort of make a little bit of awareness of my window cleaning business at the time. Yeah. Sort of cleans up the area, makes the road safer, and that's kind of how that started. And people found it like a really satisfying sort of approach. So that sort of led on to today of a video in cleaning the dirty road signs and making sort of satisfying content with it as well.
What is the equipment? What have we got here?
So this is a water-fed pole system connected to a backpack, which is what feeds the water through the end of the brush there. It's perfectly equipped to basically remove this green dirty, it's like a mildew build-up that you get on the signs. Yeah. As you can see, this is like extremely effective at removing so.
So GB News viewers, if they spot a particularly grisly sign in their area, then they can get in touch.
They can do, yeah.
And Liam Wilder's the sign guy can sort you out.
If you find Liam the sign guy online, drop me a message, let me know, and I'll add you to my list of places.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying. That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney. Now, the Corbynista MP Zara Sultana has compared Nigel Farage to the far right. Politics of the British National Party and the National Front, ahead of an anti-reform rally next month. Well, the former Labour MP, now independent, of course, has compared Nigel Farage to the far right, as I said. And she said, "We stand for solutions, not scapegoats." And on March the 28th, we'll make that clear. That is a picture on your screen that she posted earlier on today of Nigel Farage with a line through him, which appeared to some to say that they were trying to, incite some kind of violence. Well, in response to that, Zia Yousaf, who serves as Reform UK's chairman, has hit back, saying this is a disgraceful tweet to make against a fellow MP who requires round-the-clock protection due to credible threats to life. Well, let's now discuss this with my panel. I'm still joined by the former Labour MP, Lloyd Russell-Moyle, and the former Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng. Gentlemen, let's get stuck into this one. So it started with a picture, of an image with Farage with a line through it, and at that point, people say, get over yourselves, you right-wing snowflakes. There's that picture on your screen now. GB News pressed Miss Sultana for a comment all day, and she came out with this incredible outburst, saying that the Reform Party are not welcome in Birmingham, but then comparing them to the British National Party and the National Front. Kwasi Kwarteng, how can this be helpful? How can it be useful to compare Reform to some of the most toxic political parties of Britain's past?
Well, what she's trying to do, she's not trying to bring people together and come up with solutions. She's, I think, inciting hatred, frankly, and trying to polarise and divide people. And the way she shores up her base, frankly, her voting, she's not a Labour MP anymore, is to whip up those sorts of emotions. To compare a party that had 4 million votes at the last election to a far-right fringe party which really hasn't contested properly seats for many years, I think is an outrage. And also, if you look at current polling, the Reform Party, whether we like it or not, is in the mid-20s. So to say that all of those people
who are leading the polls today,
depending on which polls you're looking at, it's between about 23 and 27%, something like that. To say a quarter of the British people, the British electorate, essentially some far-right BNP supporting mass, is really offensive.
Lloyd, let's talk take your view on this now. And on the one hand, we have freedom of speech. We have the freedom of assembly. Everybody's allowed to protest about whatever they like, whether we like that or not. We've seen that with the pro-Palestinian mob. But the point here is a member of parliament is making this point, not some ramshackle protester on the street, not some activist, not some Twitterati. This is an elected representative exhuming the far right of the BNP, the British National Party, squarely saying reform are the same. Is this actually the truth? Do people on the left think that Nigel Farage is akin to the BNP, is akin to the National Front? And if so, we've got a problem.
Well, I think, first of all, I like Zara very much, actually. I think she's a very good, hard-working MP, and she speaks to a certain group of people that need to be represented in Parliament. Sure. And I think that it's silly for us to expect all of our parliamentarians to agree and say the same thing. Actually, the point of democracy is that you have people on the extremities and the centre all represented there. So Zara is expressing a view that some people hold. Now, my experience in Parliament, over the Brexit years particularly, is these hyperbolic statements tended to go down like a lead balloon in the public, and it didn't really achieve what we wanted it to do. And so I reflect on probably what I was saying similarly, not quite as extreme as that, but similar hyperbolic statements about Brexit and, kind of Farage 8 years ago. And I look back now and I think,
what actually... What do you say? Were you comparing them to fascists?
Well, I was saying Brexit was a far-right project, all that stuff. All the stuff that you all heard in those arguments. Sure. And we were all shouting at each other in the streets, weren't we? MPs on both sides were having rallies. And I remember always, kind of Conservative MPs, when we were banning fox hunting, marching outside Labour Party conference. If you want to be a party of government, you've got to expect people to rally outside your meetings, and you've got to expect people to be hyperbolic in how they talk about you.
Two things about
and I think the best way to deal with these things is to brush them off, because actually the general public, I think, see through it.
So, yeah, I think brushing off is one thing. I mean, I was in the House of Commons 14 years. 3 people were attacked, very violent. 2 of them were murdered. So it's become a much more contentious and dangerous issue, frankly, saying those sorts of things. That's the first thing I'd say. The second thing is, you're quite right. I mean, if Reform aspire to be a party of government, and from what I hear, that's what they're aiming for, they're going to have to get used to lots of protesters turning up at their annual conferences.
Protesting is one thing, Kwasi, but Nigel Farage is a man who requires a constant security detail.
Every party about to go into government has constant detail.
Nigel Farage has a serious security detail. He's been attacked with milkshakes. Nobody's ever faced a custodial sentence. There's been accusations there around two-tier policing. Corbyn got egged. Somebody went to prison for that. Nobody's been in prison for the attack on Farage.
When Prescott got egged, I don't think anyone went to prison.
Yeah, but those are different times. I mean, that was 25 years ago, 24 years ago.
It is an age-old thing that MPs have had things thrown at them for time immemorial. Now, do I think that's right? Do I think we should celebrate that? No. But should we over-exaggerate the fact that other MPs use hyperbolic language?
Today
no, I don't think that she is encouraging that.
You said time immemorial. I'm sorry. The last 10 years have got much worse. 2 of my colleagues were assassinated.
Well, I was there. Yes.
Yeah, you were in the House of Commons when I think both of them were assassinated. That was only the last 8-9 years. You can't say that the last 10 years is similar to all the other times. The John Prescott time and all the periods before. Yes, we did have the IRA. That was a specific threat, but there's a general threat. And actually,
but the general threat is not from hyperbolic language. The general threat was.
How do you know that some nutter out there might not see this?
Sorry, David was done by an Islamist nutter. That is not by someone saying far right or something. That's someone who's so down far the rabbit hole of some religious fanaticism.
But they were incited. They were incited, clearly, to do those heinous acts.
You cannot argue, I don't think, that kind of language incited those kinds of things.
Would you be saying the same thing?
I think it did.
Would you be saying the same thing if there was a picture of Zahra Sultana or Sadiq Khan or, say, another Muslim MP with a line through their face? You know full well it'll be Islamophobic, racist, and incitement to violence. And you know full well, by the way,
You're right, you're 100%
you know
right.
full well that if somebody from Reform compared Zora Sultana to a Trotskyist who murdered people in the past,
Laden or a
Osama
terrorist.
bin Laden, you know, she's been more active on Gaza than Coventry throughout this entire campaign. You would not be sitting there saying this is okay. This is about double standards.
She is very regularly compared to, even earlier on, I overheard someone saying, you know, she was a Marxist and a kind of communist.
She's a Marxist.
Those kinds of,
Yeah, but that's
that
all
kind of
inside
language is all the same. Now, look, I have had bullets through my front door when I was an MP. I had posters up around my town that were homophobic and vile in nature. I was attacked on the street. I was hit on the street. My glass is broken. You know, I'm not undermining the fact that there is some very dangerous people out there, and MPs are in a dangerous situation. And I generally think that you shouldn't target the individual MPs. But her saying, her saying that she believes reform is akin to the BNP or the English Defence League, or whatever they are.
Most rabid anti-fascists or anti-racists out there?
I don't agree with that analysis. I think it's hyperbolic, but I think it's her right to say it, and I think the best thing to do is move on.
OK, gentlemen, we have to leave it there. We've simply run out of time on this one as well. Thank you very much. Now, after the break, a sleepy village in Essex, population just over 700, has a dubious honour of being Britain's first place where there are now more asylum seekers than residents. I'll be speaking to a councillor on his fears for resident safety and plummeting property prices. That's next on Farage.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Winds from the north will bring a real chill to Greece and Turkey over the next few days. Meanwhile, plenty of sunny skies in Spain. There's that northerly wind making many of the Greek islands colder than the UK. Certainly chillier across parts of Croatia. Some sunny spells in Italy, along with a few showers. Fine and sunny weather for the Balearics and southern Spain, along with the Canaries. And the breeze here will be easing. But that cold wind will continue to blow across the Greek islands into the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney, standing in for the big man. Now, residents of a quiet picture postcard village in the home counties say they are about to become outnumbered by asylum seekers housed at a former RAF airfield next door. Villagers in Wethersfield near Braintree, Essex, say they do not feel safe walking the streets and the country lanes at night due to the threat of antisocial behaviour. Now, the village, which has a population of just over 700 people, is about to be increased by 800 asylum seekers at Wethersfield. An astonishing story. And joining me now to discuss this is the Independent District Councillor, Mark Alt. Mark, welcome to the show. I read your story with interest in the Daily Mail. It's an incredible picture to be painted of military-aged young men loafing around a village with scant few facilities, drinking beer, intimidating the locals. Tell us more about the extraordinary situation that you're faced upon.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, but I think before we're drawn into that, I think the clear message here is that local communities have been misled about the future of this site. Given that the public commitments made by both current and previous governments to close the asylum centre, why has it remained open, and why has there been a lack of transparency regarding its future? We were told that the increase would not happen until the SDO was signed off properly. There are serious contamination issues on that site. And all of a sudden, we're being lied to, information is being held back, and they're now going to increase the numbers up to 800 without consultation with the residents. So are they hiding something? That site was used for decades by the military, and it's proven that there is high amounts of contamination on that site, from nuclear waste to missiles and all sorts of things that were buried in the ground when the Americans left. So did the government my question is, did the government ever really have a concrete plan to close Wethersfield, or was it always just a political rhetoric?
Well, it's a story that we've covered for many, many months here on GB News, and we know there's been strong resistance from all kinds of pressure groups locally to have this halted. And you're right to say the Labour Party, I think, said that they would not go ahead with this. Then again, they said they wouldn't go ahead and rely on asylum hotels, and they've done that too. Back to the here and now. You've been so concerned by this. You've been around the village clearing up bin bags full of beer cans. You've been talking to locals about their concerns. They don't feel safe to go around the area in the evening. Tell us about what locals are telling you.
Well, I think, when you've got an increase of population at the size of the village, people are wandering around the streets, and it's obvious you can see the litter, and local people use the local facilities, the pubs. I've been collecting waste for the last 2 years, and all of a sudden it has increased significantly. 4 bin liners of beer cans, beer bottles in the vicinity of the base. Now, we don't know if that's people in the base, travelling to the base, working at the base, we're not sure. But there is, a serious issue now with the fact that people may be drink driving, dangers to the public, increased traffic on the roads. So the whole thing now is just increasing, becoming more of a significant issue for the public. It's visible to everybody that lives local.
And obviously
we're drawing away from the main point here, and we don't want to be drawn on the same things over and over again about the people on that site, and it's a consequence of what's going on. You're putting a equivalent to a town near a village without the local infrastructure in place. It's obvious there's going to be issues. The fact is, this base should never have been here. James cleverly stated in 2023 that this base was, quote, wasn't appropriate for asylum accommodation, and it was his priority to close it down. The nature of the site being rural, limited transport infrastructure and narrow roads. That was his statement in 2023. Keir Starmer stated in November 2024, when questioned by James Cleverly, that he said he would close that site as part of the manifesto, and he said he would stick to the manifesto agreement. Why then are we now having an increase up to 800 on that site before the SDOs have been clearly seen We do not know whether that site's been cleared of contamination. We do know that they're taking water up there. We know they're taking water in. So the water source is not safe. There's been outbreaks of Legionella on that site. So it's not fair on the people who live there. It's not fair on the local residents. And there doesn't seem to be an end of it. I don't understand what the specific obstacles are that have prevented that closure and why it hasn't been, why isn't the public being fully informed?
OK. We have to leave it there. Thank you very much for filling us in on that extraordinary situation in Wethersfield. That's the Independent District Councillor for the area, Mark Olds. Let's get back to the panel now. I'm rejoined by the Lord Chancellor and Conservative MP, Sir Robert Buckland, as well as my panel. Of course, that's the former Labour MP, Lloyd Russell-Moore, and the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kwasi Kwarteng. Gentlemen, welcome back. Sir Robert, let's start with you. Councillor Olds was saying there a succession of governments have betrayed the people of the area. First, James Cleverly said this would not go ahead. Then the Labour Party said this would not go ahead, and it has gone ahead. It's gone ahead with aplomb. It's another community that's been completely ignored by the politicians.
And you get this imbalance between a very small community and then a complete change in its character and nature. And you've got to ask yourself, who are the people that are being put in this place? Are they unlawful migrants? If so, we should be concerned that they're being allowed to drink beer and wander around, because frankly, if they're here illegally, they should be under a much more secure environment. If they're asylum seekers awaiting determination of their appeal or their legal process, is putting them out in the middle of the sticks the right place for them in the first instance? Isn't it better to have them perhaps nearer sources of support and advice and nearer to the authorities so that we know what's happening?
Them in the country in the first place? The problem with all this is like people don't want them in the city centres. They don't want them on council estates either.
Martin,
it's about border control or a lack of.
Yeah, but this isn't just our problem, is it? This is a problem across Europe. And the idea, that politicians talk is cheap. But politicians say we don't want them in the country. Let's try and turn them back. Let's try and hold back the tide.
Well, none of which happened under the previous Conservative
but the truth
government.
is, this is really difficult stuff, and people want to come to, because Britain is a very attractive place for people to want to come.
Make it less attractive.
English. Well, I'll tell you
this.
this.
Shut the borders.
I'll tell you this.
Stop issuing visas like confetti.
That's such a glib thing to say. It's such an easy thing to say. Why is it that every country in Europe shares the same problem that
Germany
we do?
just closed its borders. It's sending Afghans back to the Taliban.
Because of mass migration problems that originate well beyond the boundaries of Europe. What we should be doing in this country... So we can't
do anything about it?
Well, no, we can. We can do a lot about it. First of all, stop all this nonsense about people coming here and then disappearing into the black market. How many people are just disappearing and working on construction sites or in restaurants, not for the minimum wage? It seems to me that we've got to get a grip on actually who's here, because some of the figures I look at, I think, goodness me, I'm not sure they're even right, bearing in mind the number of people who are here under the radar. So let's be honest about this debate and stop issuing glib statements.
Well, it's not a glib statement. People want to take back control of our borders. They voted for it time and time again. Your government, the present government, haven't done anything about it. People feel completely at their wits' end about it. And the net result is that communities like Wethersfield have now got more asylum seekers than locals. It's a grotesque aberration and a violation of what politicians are told to do. And let's listen to the bloody voters. Lloyd.
Well, I think that we always see this after a Conservative government. In 1997, the Labour Party inherited an immigration system that was out of control, hundreds of thousands of people coming over, huge backlogs for asylum cases, and over 10 years, or actually we did it in about 8 years, we got that down to rather small numbers being processed. We're talking about less than 50,000 net every year. That is where we are heading to now. But there will be pain in dealing with the complete disaster of a mess that we have inherited. And that disaster is no real plan of how you process people, no real plan of how you
So you're going to keep blaming the Tories and nothing can be done to stop it. Kwasi Kwarteng,
the idea...
It's Groundhog Day.
We did it in 97.
I think there's blame on both sides. The idea that Labour are going to be tough on mass immigration...
Well, we did it last time.
A lot of the viewers are deeply sceptical about Labour's sort of intention on this, and I don't think they have, frankly, the credibility. We, frankly, I think messed this up. We campaigned, you and I entered Parliament at the same time, and in that manifesto we had a very clear commitment to tens of thousands as a net figure of migrants. That figure was, 7-8 times exceeded, and that was, I think, one of the biggest failures.
There was 1 million last year.
10 times. That was one of the biggest failures that we had. However, I do think that we've got to acknowledge what Robert said. This is a European problem. It's not just a British problem.
But we left the European Union precisely to make it not a European problem. Our border begins and ends at our own border.
That was a myth. That was an illusion. That was an illusion. The idea that Brexit was going to solve the migration problem was the biggest lie of all. What happened? We had thousands, tens of thousands of people coming in from other parts of the world because we had a labour shortage, and particularly after COVID. During COVID, we had no mass migration into the country, obviously, because we had a lockdown.
So the answer is to let a million people through the front door legally. Come on.
I think we should absolutely limit legal migration because that's where the numbers are. And in fact, the last government did that. So James Cleverly did raise the thresholds on visas and earnings.
No, you introduced a point-based system.
Yeah, but
point-based systems. No, point-based systems.
The numbers started coming down.
Migration. Right? No, point-based systems wherever they've been used in Australia, in Britain, everywhere. Kind of in New Zealand, they always increased migration. So this big lie, the Conservatives went around saying we're going to introduce a point-based system. No, how you reduce migration is you have a number-based system, a system that says these are the numbers that you can come in. And actually, we used to have it before. We had it before the Conservatives took over and changed. We used to have every month a quota, and if you met the quota, you just weren't allowed in. That's what we had. That's what Labour introduced. That's what we have to go back to. Gentlemen, we'll have to go back to.
I'm afraid we have to call time on excellent debate. Sir Robert Buckland, superb, and Lloyd and Kwasi, excellent. Thank you very much to my panel. Coming up next, in the final action-packed section of the show, a bombshell report has exposed how Brussels raided taxpayer funds to bankroll a massive propaganda machine to try and discredit Brexit. I'll speak to one of the report's authors, and that's next here on Farage.
Evening. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's turned milder and it's going to be very mild through tomorrow, but won't feel as mild because it'll be quite breezy and yes, there's quite a bit of rain to come as well. There's a lot of weather fronts ganging up out in the Atlantic. They're moving in. The isobars are squeezing together, telling us the winds are picking up. Band of heavy rain crossing Scotland this evening. Northern England seeing some heavy downpours too. Might even hear a crack of thunder here and there. Just generally staying cloudy with outbreaks of rain on and off through the night. That breeze, the cloud, all helping to keep the temperatures up. A much milder night than we've had by morning. Temperatures 7 or 8 degrees in the east, double figures further south and west. But as I said, it won't necessarily feel that mild because it's going to be cloudy and for many a wet start to the day. That rain on and off across northern Scotland, but some drier spells. Another pulse of heavier rain coming into southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland. It could be a very wet start to the morning rush hour here. There'll be some heavier outbreaks of rain too crossing western England and Wales. Parts of eastern England generally dry but fairly drab. But as I say, you'll notice that jump in temperatures compared to recent mornings. Some of that showery rain will work its way into eastern England. Heavier pulses of rain, the brighter colours there across northern England, parts of Wales. Northern Ireland cheering up for a time, but then more showers come in here later on. Wales, western parts of England do look a bit brighter come the end of the day. And look at that, it's milder. Temperatures in double digits pretty much across the board, and many places getting into the teens. Friday also looking mild, but also looking wet. There's Met Office warnings in place for the wind and the rain across parts of the west, and it will be a very wet day in western areas. Much of the east of England staying dry on Friday until late on, but it's going to be a blustery day wherever you are. But those winds coming up from the south. So again, on Friday, it will be much, much milder than it has been.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney, standing in for the big man. Now, a bombshell report has exposed how Brussels raided taxpayer funds to bankroll a massive propaganda machine, pumping billions of euros into NGOs, think tanks and even media outlets to push pro-EU messaging and even discredit Brexit. Now, how deep does this corruption go, and how much of your money has been used in the past to smear Brexit and indeed Britain? Well, joining me now to discuss this is one of the authors of the report and the academic, Frank Farage. Frank, always a pleasure to have your company. It's an astonishing report called The EU's Propaganda Machine. Billions and billions of euros pumped into pro-EU propaganda, and the taxpayers footed the bill. Tell us more.
Well, the thing that really shocked me was that we discovered that there is an informal propaganda network that involves so-called non-governmental organizations and the EU Commission. And the way that it works, that the EU Commission basically gives money to these NGOs in order for the NGOs then to recycle their policies. And then the EU Commission says it's not us who thought this was a good policy, but the experts in the non-governmental organizations are meant to be non-governmental, disinterested, and neutral, but they're anything but. And when we when we looked at it deeper, we decided and we saw that a lot of these NGOs are in the business of promoting ideologies, gender ideology, for example. They're in the business of attacking Eurosceptic governments. So they give a lot of money to NGOs in Poland or Slovakia or Hungary when they, in order to discredit their criticism, the government's criticism of the EU. But what's really insidious about this is they're actually corrupting civic life. And that's in fact what's really happening. Basically, they've created this movement. And the amount of money we're talking about is phenomenal. We're talking about 2 billion euros over the last 10 years that's been entirely devoted towards propaganda. And they claim that the money is actually being spent to help the people of Europe. But of course, it's nothing to do with building infrastructure or helping people have a better life. It's simply to make people believe that the EU is their friend.
And Frank, an astonishing sum of money, €250 million was given to the pro-European media outlets Euronews. Now, Euronews was still having a pop at Brexit Party MEPs like myself after we'd voted to leave the European Union before we'd properly Brexited. And British taxpayers were effectively bankrolling anti-Brexit media paid for by the European Union. It's an astonishing state of affairs, and many people, Frank, would say it's time for a full DOGE. It's time for transparency, a full audit, and perhaps people should be held accountable. Frank, we've run out of time. Sadly, we have to say goodbye to you, Frank Farage. An astonishing report there called The EU's Propaganda Machine, funding NGOs to promote EU values. Quickly back to my panel. Kwasi Kwarteng, does any of this surprise you? Billions and billions of euros pumping into the propaganda machine.
I mean, this is almost totalitarian. What they're doing, it's a project. It's a values, the values project. Of course it is. It's propaganda. No, you could laugh. You could laugh, but 2 billion euros is not a laughing matter. And it's clearly the case that they're pushing political messaging. And they see that as their job because it's an ideological commitment to the EU. And the other thing, lastly, I would say, is that Brexit was the biggest humiliation for the EU as a body that it's ever had. And when it happened, they wanted to respond to it. And it's entirely believable that they would spend huge amounts of money to try and indoctrinate people against leaving.
You're scoffing away. What's so funny about billions of euros being spent promoting the EU and going against the will of member states?
EU's money being spent to promote its values that it is founded for, to promote certain kinds of things. The EU is not an economic trading bloc. That was the problem with a lot of Brexiteers. They said it was gone beyond the economic trading bloc. It never was. It was an...
It was the EEC. No, it was the European Economic Community.
Yes,
it was
that
a
was
trading
one
bloc.
small part of it.
And then it changed into the European Union.
There was one small part of it was a trading bloc.
I'm older than you. I remember the EEC. No one talks about the European Union.
One small part of it was the EEC, and then you had other bits that came in along with it. And the EU, it was created under the system, was to promote values. And that money is doing what it says on the tin, promoting EU values. We would expect the British government to spend money promoting British values. I see nothing nothing wrong with the EU. It's
British,
EU
British taxpayers were bankrolling this EU
because we were a member of the EU. We signed up to the values.
No, we voted to leave at this point.
Then we voted
Lloyd
to leave.
and Kwasi, we have to leave it there. Up next, State of the Nation with Matt Goodwin. Matt, got a quick minute. What's on your menu, Captain?
Well, we're looking firstly at Michael Knowles' epic takedown of Rory Stewart, which you might have seen on social media. Rather humorous. Michael's going to be joining us on the show. We're looking at the latest ECHR craziness, this time an Iraqi asylum seeker. We're also going to be looking at what was said at a big conference this week about the need to improve birth rates in this country. Well, OK, how would you actually do that in terms of public policy? So a lot of interesting stuff going on. That would be good migration. Lloyd is not the answer. The answer is to increase birth rates among British people.
Gentlemen, actors, thank you very much to Lloyd and to Kwasi, and of course stick around because State of the Nation is up next with Matt Goodwin. Now, no doubt I'll have a few choice words to say about Zara Sultana as well and what she's been up to today, and I believe that Matt Goodwin has a few choice bits of archaeological digging up of what she said in the past. What a wonderful person she is. So thank you very much. I'm taking 2 days off, so I'll see you back on Monday. Dawn Neeson covering for me 3 till 6. Now here's your weather with Alex Deakin.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's turned milder and it's going to be very mild through tomorrow, but won't feel as mild because it'll be quite breezy and yes, there's quite a bit of rain to come as well. There's a lot of weather fronts ganging up out in the Atlantic. They're moving